Have you ever wondered why, even in a relationship filled with care and attention, you sometimes feel invisible, unappreciated, or unloved? What the problem isn't them, and not even love itself, but the way it's being expressed. Welcome to How to Feel Loved, the guide that will change the way you understand love, connection, and intimacy. In this audiobook, Chris Croft reveals the secret language of love and shows you simple, practical ways to feel truly valued, appreciated, and connected with the people who matter most. Whether you're struggling to feel love in your relationship, wanting to strengthen your bond, or just curious about what really makes people feel cherished, this book will give you insights, tools, and real-life strategies at work. So, settle in, open your heart, and get ready to discover how to experience love, not just in your head, but in your life. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, What is Love?, begins by gently challenging one of the biggest misconceptions we grow up believing, that love is a magical feeling that should always be there if a relationship is right. Croft explains in an engaging and almost conversational way that love is not just a spontaneous emotion that appears and disappears like the weather. Instead, he reframes love as something far more practical and powerful, a feeling that is created when certain emotional needs are met. He invites the reader to imagine two people who genuinely care for each other, but still feel distant, misunderstood, or unappreciated. The problem, he suggests, is not the absence of love, but the absence of the right signals that make a person feel loved. Through relatable examples and simple logic, he shows that love is less about grand romantic gestures and more about understanding what specifically makes your partner feel valued. One person might crave kind words, another may need physical affection, while someone else feels closest when given time or thoughtful actions. When these needs are unmet, people mistakenly conclude that love has faded, when in reality it has simply not been communicated in the right language. The chapter cleverly shifts responsibility from finding the perfect person to learning how love actually works. Croft emphasizes that love is not mind reading, not dramatic sacrifice, and not constant passion. It is consistent behavior that aligns with what makes the other person feel secure and appreciated. He highlights that misunderstandings often occur because people give love in a way they prefer to receive it, assuming their partner feels the same. This mismatch leads to frustration, even though both may be trying their best. The powerful lesson here is that love is a skill, not just a feeling. It requires awareness, effort, and adaptation. By the end of the chapter, the reader walks away with a comforting realization. If love can be understood, it can also be improved. The key learning points are clear. Love is practical. Love is learnable. People feel loved in different ways, and relationships improve when we consciously choose actions that meet our partner's emotional needs rather than rely on assumptions. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, How to Feel Loved, shifts the spotlight from blaming others to empowering ourselves. Croft begins with simple but uncomfortable truth. Many of us sit quietly in relationships, secretly wishing our partner would magically understand what we need. We hope they will notice our silence, decode our moods, and somehow just know how to make us feel cherished. But when that doesn't happen, we start building silent stories in our minds. Maybe they don't care enough. Maybe the spark is gone. Croft gently dismantles this myth by showing that feeling loved is not about waiting. It's about understanding and communication. He explains that love is not mind reading. It's signaling. If we don't clearly express what makes us feel valued, we can't expect others to consistently get it right. The chapter unfolds almost like a reality check wrapped in reassurance. Croft illustrates how people often sabotage their own happiness by expecting their partner to guess their emotional needs. Instead of speaking up, they test, withdraw, or complain indirectly. This creates a cycle where both people feel unappreciated. The turning point in the chapter is a realization that to feel loved, we must first understand ourselves. What truly makes you feel cared for? Is it kind words, physical affection, shared time, thoughtful gestures, or practical help? Once you identify it, the next brave step is to communicate it clearly, not as a demand, but as guidance. Croft emphasizes that most partners actually want to make us happy. They just need a clear map. He also introduces a powerful idea, taking responsibility for your own emotional experience. Instead of measuring love by how often you feel butterflies or grand gestures, measure by consistent effort and willingness to respond to each other's needs. when you openly say, "It really makes me feel loved when you give your partner the opportunity to succeed. And when they try, even imperfectly, you acknowledge it." That appreciation creates positive reinforcement, strengthening the relationship rather than weakening it. The key learning points from this chapter are practical and empowering. Feeling love begins with self-awareness. Clear communication is more effective than silent expectations. Love thrives when both partners take responsibility instead of assigning blame. Most people are willing to love better if they are shown how. Appreciation encourages more loving behavior than criticism ever could. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves the reader with a hopeful message. Feeling loved is not a matter of luck. It's a matter of understanding, clarity, and courage. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, The 5 Ways to Feel Loved, acts like the big reveal moment of the book, the point where confusion about love suddenly becomes clear and practical. Croft explains that while people often argue about effort, romance, or commitment, most relationship struggles actually come down to one simple issue. We don't all feel loved in the same way. Imagine two people both trying their best. One brings small gifts home. The other offers constant help and support, but neither feels appreciated. Why? Because they're speaking different emotional languages. This chapter introduces the 5 core ways people typically experience love. Through words, touch, time, gifts, and active service. Croft presents them not as complicated psychological theories, but as everyday behaviors we already recognize: compliments, hugs, focused attention, thoughtful surprises, or practical help. What makes the chapter engaging is how it turns love into something almost like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Croft explains that each person usually has 1 or 2 dominant ways that make them feel truly valued. When those needs are met, they feel secure and connected. When they are ignored, even unintentionally, they feel neglected, no matter how much effort the other person thinks they're putting in. The problem, he explains, is that we tend to give love the way we prefer to receive it. If you value kind words, you'll offer praise. If you value helpful actions, you'll try to fix problems. But if your partner's main need is quality time, your helpfulness may not register as love at all. This mismatch creates frustration, not because love is missing, but because it's being delivered in the wrong format. Croft's message is both comforting and empowering. Love is not mysterious. It is methodical. Once you identify your own primary love language and your partner's, everything becomes clearer. You stop taking things personally. You start noticing effort in new ways. And most importantly, you begin to intentionally give love in a way that will actually be felt. The chapter encourages curiosity over criticism. Instead of asking, "Why don't they care?" you begin asking, "What makes them feel cared for?" The key learning points from this chapter are powerful. People feel loved in different, predictable ways. Good intentions are not enough. Love must be expressed in the right form. Most relationship conflict comes from misunderstanding, not lack of love. Identifying and adapting to your partner's primary love language strengthens connection. Love becomes easier and more consistent when you treat it as a skill to learn rather than a feeling to chase. By the end of the chapter, love no longer feels like luck or destiny. It feels like something you can understand, practice, and improve with awareness and effort. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter Words explores one of the most powerful and underestimated ways people experience love: the simple act of saying it. Croft begins by painting a relatable picture. Imagine someone who works hard, tries their best, stays loyal and supportive, yet quietly feels invisible, not because they aren't loved, but because they rarely hear it. For some people, love lives in language. A sincere, "I appreciate you," a heartfelt compliment, or even a small, "Thank you for doing that," can light up their entire emotional world. Without those words, they may begin to feel unnoticed, even if their partner believes their actions are speaking loudly enough. Croft explains in an engaging and almost humorous tone that many of us assume love should be obvious. They know I love them. I don't need to say it every day. But for someone whose primary emotional need is verbal affirmation, silence can slowly feel like indifference. The chapter shows how powerful words can be, not just grand romantic declarations, but consistent, specific appreciation. It's not about flattery or exaggeration. It's about acknowledgement. Croft points out that criticism also carries enormous weight. for people who value words. A careless comment, sarcasm, or public put-down can linger far longer than intended. For them, language isn't casual, it's emotional oxygen. Through practical examples, the chapter reveals how easy it is to transform a relationship by changing speech patterns. Instead of focusing on what's missing, speak about what you admire. Instead of assuming gratitude is understood, say it out loud. Instead of joking in ways that sting, choose words that strengthen. Croft makes it clear that words are not empty when they're sincere. They are signals of attention, respect, and love. He also encourages people who need verbal affirmation to communicate that need clearly rather than expecting their partner to guess. The key learning points from this chapter are clear and actionable. For some people, verbal appreciation is the strongest expression of love. Silence can feel like neglect. Even when love exists, specific praise is more powerful than general compliments. Negative words can damage deeply, especially for those who value affirmation. Expressing appreciation regularly builds emotional security and strengthens connection. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a simple but transformative insight. Sometimes the smallest sentences carry the biggest emotional impact. Love, for many, is only one kind sentence away. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter Touch explores one of the most instinctive and emotionally powerful ways humans connect: physical contact. Croft opens this chapter by reminding us that touch is our very first language. Before we ever understood words, we understood comfort through a hug, reassurance through a hand on the shoulder, and safety through closeness. For some people, this need never fades. They may function well in daily life, but deep down, they feel most love when there is physical closeness. Holding hands while walking, a spontaneous hug in the kitchen, sitting close on the couch, or even a gentle pat of encouragement. To them, touch is not just physical. It is emotional confirmation that they matter. Croft describes how misunderstandings often happen when one partner values touch highly and the other doesn't naturally prioritize it. The partner who needs touch may start feeling rejected or distant if physical affection becomes rare, even if everything else in the relationship seems stable. Meanwhile, the other partner may believe, we talk, we support each other. What's missing? The gap isn't love. It's the form in which love is delivered. The chapter carefully separates affectionate touch from purely sexual contact, explaining that while intimacy can be part of it, everyday non-sexual affection is equally important. A quick hug before leaving for work or sitting shoulder to shoulder while watching TV can mean more than grand gestures planned once a year. With his practical tone, Croft emphasizes that physical affection does not require dramatic change, just awareness and consistency. He also notes that stress, routine, and busyness can slowly reduce touch in long-term relationships, making people feel emotionally disconnected without understanding why. Reintroducing small moments of contact can quietly rebuild closeness. At the same time, he stresses the importance of respecting boundaries. Touch must always be mutual and welcome. The goal is not obligation, but connection. The key learning points from this chapter are clear. For some people, physical affection is the strongest signal of love. Small, everyday touches often matter more than grand romantic gestures. Lack of touch can feel like rejection. Even when love exists, non-sexual affection is essential for emotional security. Awareness and consistent effort can restore closeness in long-term relationships. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a simple but powerful realization. Sometimes love is not something that needs to be explained. It just needs to be felt hand in hand. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter Time explores a deeply meaningful but often overlooked way people experience love: the gift of undivided attention. Croft begins with a simple but powerful observation. In a world full of distractions, phones buzzing, work deadlines, endless notifications, giving someone your full attention has become rare. And precisely because it is rare, it has become incredibly valuable. For some people, love is not measured in compliments, gifts, or even physical affection. It is measured in moments. Sitting together without checking your phone, listening without interrupting, choosing to spend an evening talking instead of scrolling. To them, time equals importance. If you give your time, you're saying, you matter more than everything else competing for my attention. Croft paints a relatable picture of couples who technically spend hours in the same house, but feel emotionally distant. They eat dinner side by side, yet one watches TV while the other scrolls through social media. They share space, but not presence. For someone whose primary need is quality time, this feels lonely, even if there is no conflict. The absence of focused attention can quietly signal disinterest. On the other hand, even a short but fully engaged conversation can make them feel deeply connected. Croft emphasizes that quality time is not about expensive vacations or elaborate date nights. It is about being mentally and emotionally present. Eye contact, active listening, shared experiences. These simple acts build emotional security. He also explains how misunderstandings arise when one partner assumes that being around is the same as being present. For the person who values time, multitasking during conversation can feel like rejection. But once couples understand this difference, small adjustments can create dramatic improvements. Scheduling regular time together, planning shared activities, or simply putting devices away during conversations can restore closeness. Croft's tone is practical and hopeful. He reminds readers that time is a choice, and choosing someone consistently strengthens love. The key learning points from this chapter are clear and actionable. For some people, undivided attention is the strongest expression of love. Physical presence is not the same as emotional presence. Short, focused moments can be more meaningful than long, distracted ones. Prioritizing time together builds security and reduces feelings of neglect. Love grows when we intentionally protect time from distractions. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a powerful realization. When you give someone your full attention, even for a few minutes, you're giving them something priceless. Proof that they truly matter. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter Gifts gently dismantles one of the biggest misunderstandings about love: the idea that giving gifts is materialistic or shallow. Croft explains that for some people, gifts are not about money, price tags, or extravagance. They are physical symbols of thoughtfulness. Imagine someone picking up a small chocolate bar on the way home, simply because it reminded them of their partner. To the giver, it may feel like a tiny gesture, but to someone whose primary love language is gifts, that small item carries a powerful message. I was thinking about you even when you weren't with me. The object itself may be simple, but the meaning behind it is what makes it special. Croft described how this love language often gets unfairly judged. A partner who doesn't value gifts may think, "Why do I need to buy things to prove I care?" Meanwhile, the person who values gifts might quietly feel overlooked when birthdays are forgotten or anniversaries pass without acknowledgement. For them, a gift is a tangible reminder of love, something they can see and hold. It represents effort, memory, and intentionality. Croft uses everyday examples to show that the most meaningful gifts are rarely expensive. They are personal. A handwritten note, a favorite snack, a souvenir from a trip. These small tokens can mean more than grand purchases because they reflect attention and care. The chapter also highlights that timing and thought matter more than cost. Forgetting important occasions can feel deeply hurtful to someone who values gifts because it may signal forgetfulness or lack of priority. However, when partners understand this need, they can adapt easily by planning ahead, keeping simple reminders, or surprising each other occasionally. Croft emphasizes that giving a gift is less about obligation and more about awareness, showing that you notice what makes the other person happy. The key learning points from this chapter are clear. For some people, gifts are powerful symbols of love and thoughtfulness. The value of a gift lies in its meaning, not its price. Remembering special occasions builds emotional security. Small, spontaneous tokens often matter more than grand gestures. Understanding your partner's love language prevents unfair judgments about materialism. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a refreshing insight. Sometimes love is not spoken or explained. It is wrapped, handed over, and quietly says, "You are on my mind." In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter Service dives into a love language that is often overlooked but incredibly powerful: doing things for others. Croft opens with a scenario that feels instantly familiar. Imagine coming home after a long, exhausting day, and instead of finding a partner who simply talks about their day or gives a hug, you notice that they've made your favorite tea, cleared the dishes, or handled a task you were dreading. For someone whose primary love language is acts of service, these simple actions speak louder than words, gifts, or even touch. It's not about obligation or chore lists. It's about noticing what your partner needs and acting on it thoughtfully. Every act, no matter how small, is a message. I care enough to make your life easier. Croft makes the chapter engaging by using real-life, almost cinematic examples. He describes couples where love is present but goes unrecognized because one partner communicates affection through service while the other expects verbal affirmation or physical touch. The problem arises when good intentions are invisible or taken for granted. Doing laundry, fixing a leaking tap, or preparing a simple meal might be seen as mundane tasks. But to the person who feels love through service, these actions are the heartbeat of a relationship. Croft also emphasizes that timing and willingness matter. Half-hearted or resentful help can backfire, while sincere, thoughtful action builds trust and deep emotional security. The chapter also teaches a subtle but critical point. Acts of service require awareness and empathy. It's not about guessing randomly. It's about observing, listening, and taking initiative without being asked. Croft encourages readers to notice patterns, anticipate needs, and take joy in doing things for each other. The beauty of this love language is that it transforms ordinary life into extraordinary connection. The kitchen becomes a place of care. The laundry is silent, I love you. And small, everyday acts turn into enduring emotional bonds. Key learning points from this chapter include: for some people, acts of service are the clearest expression of love. Thoughtful, practical help communicates care more effectively than words or gifts. Half-hearted or reluctant service can feel worse than none at all. Awareness and initiative in meeting your partner's needs strengthen trust and connection. Ordinary daily tasks can become extraordinary expressions of love when done intentionally. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a refreshing insight. Love is not always about grand gestures. It often lives in the quiet, practical acts that make life easier and hearts lighter, proving that care is as much about action as emotion. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, Understanding Your Partner, is like the turning point in a romantic drama, where confusion, frustration, and miscommunication suddenly begin to make sense. Croft opens with a playful yet relatable scenario. Two people deeply care for each other, yet they constantly argue, feel distant, or take each other for granted. Why? Because love is often spoken in different languages. One person might feel cherished through touch, another through words, a third through acts of service. Without understanding these differences, couples end up frustrated, wondering why love isn't enough. Croft engages readers with humorous examples of mismatched gestures. A partner who brings flowers while the other wishes for a heartfelt conversation, or someone who cleans the kitchen while their loved one longs simply to sit together and share undivided time. These examples make the abstract idea of love languages tangible and entertaining. The chapter emphasizes that understanding your partner is more than just noticing what they like. It's about identifying what makes them feel truly valued. Croft explains that misinterpretation is the root of many conflicts. We often project our own needs on others, assuming they feel loved the same way we do. This assumption leads to frustration on both sides, as genuine effort goes unnoticed or unappreciated. He stresses the importance of curiosity, observation, and open communication. Asking simple questions like, what makes you feel loved? Or paying attention to which gestures bring a smile or spark joy. By actively learning your partner's preferences, you can translate your love into actions they actually feel and appreciate. Croft also points out that understanding your partner is a continuous process. People evolve, moods change, and life circumstances shift. So what worked last year may need adaptation today. The chapter encourages patience, empathy, and willingness to adjust without judgment, recognizing the small things, how they respond to touch, words, gifts, time, or service, builds emotional awareness and strengthens intimacy over time. The humor, relatable stories, and practical exercises make the advice engaging and easy to apply. Key learning points from this chapter include: love is experienced differently by everyone. Understanding your partner's preferences is crucial. Miscommunication often arises from projecting your own needs onto others. Observing and asking questions fosters clarity and emotional connection. Love requires adaptation. People and circumstances change over time. Small gestures, when aligned with your partner's love language, create lasting bonds. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a powerful insight. True love isn't just about feeling. It's about translating intention into actions your partner actually experiences. When you understand them, love stops being a guessing game and starts becoming a shared, joyful language. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, Why We Feel Unloved, dives into the sneaky, often overlooked reasons that make people feel disconnected, even in relationships where love is present. Croft opens with a relatable scenario. Two people care deeply for each other, yet one walks around feeling empty, unseen, or unappreciated. He explains that feeling unloved isn't always about the absence of love. It's about missing the signals that make love tangible. Perhaps the gestures are misaligned with the person's emotional needs, or maybe efforts are consistent but go unnoticed. The chapter reads like a detective story, revealing the hidden culprits behind emotional disconnect. Unmet expectations, assumptions, past experiences, and miscommunication. Croft illustrates this with humorous yet telling examples. A partner buys flowers, but the other craves a heartfelt conversation, or someone cleans a house while their partner longs simply for shared attention. Love is there, but the wrong language creates a perception of absence. Croft emphasizes that much of our frustration stems from expectations we never clearly expressed. We assume our partner knows exactly what makes us feel cherished, but humans are not mind readers. The chapter highlights the subtle ways people inadvertently undermine their own sense of being loved, focusing on negatives, comparing to others, or holding on to grudges. Croft also brings attention to the role of past experiences. Previous heartbreaks, childhood neglect, or unfulfilled desires can amplify feelings of being unloved in the present. The narrative keeps the reader engaged with relatable aha moments, prompting self-reflection without guilt. He encourages readers to step back and recognize that feeling loved is not purely dependent on another's actions. It's also about clarity, communication, and awareness. Small steps, like expressing needs clearly, noticing your partner's efforts, and adjusting expectations, can dramatically shift your perception. Love isn't absent. It's often just being lost in translation. Key learning points from this chapter include: feeling unloved often comes from miscommunication, unmet expectations, or misaligned gestures. Assumptions about your partner's intentions can create unnecessary emotional distance. Past experiences can intensify current feelings of being unloved. Awareness and clear communication help translate love into felt experience. Recognizing and appreciating genuine effort strengthens emotional connection. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a liberating message. The world isn't lacking in love. You just need to understand how it is being expressed and consciously align it with what makes you feel valued and cherished. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, How to Improve Your Relationship, is like a masterclass in turning everyday struggles into lasting connection. Croft opens with a vivid, relatable scenario. Two people who love each other deeply but keep running into the same arguments, frustrations, or emotional distance. He immediately reframes the problem, not as a lack of love, but as a lack of understanding and practical action. Love, he reminds us, is not a magical force that automatically grows stronger over time. It is a skill that can be learned, practiced, and refined. With his engaging, almost conversational storytelling, Croft guides the reader through the steps of consciously improving their relationship, using a mix of humor, real-life examples, and practical exercises. The chapter emphasizes awareness and empathy as the foundation for change. Croft illustrates how small, consistent actions, listening without judgment, expressing appreciation, spending focused time together, or learning to speak your partner's love language, can transform everyday life. He points out that couples often get stuck in negative loops, focusing on what's wrong instead of what's working, which lead to frustration on both sides. By consciously noticing efforts, celebrating small victories, and responding with encouragement, love becomes visible and felt. Croft also highlights the importance of taking responsibility. Waiting for your partner to fix the relationship is rarely effective. Real change starts with your own actions and mindset. The chapter is packed with practical advice. Communicate clearly about needs, adapt your behaviors to meet your partner's emotional preferences, and regularly check in on each other's feelings. Croft uses engaging stories, like a partner leaving sticky notes of encouragement around the house, or scheduling small, intentional moments of connection, to show how minor, thoughtful changes can yield enormous emotional impact. He also stresses patience. Improving a relationship is a journey, not a quick fix, and consistent effort compounds over time. Key learning points from this chapter include: love grows when effort and understanding are consistent, not assumed. Awareness of your partner's needs and love language is critical. Positive reinforcement and noticing small gestures strengthen emotional bonds. Taking responsibility for your actions fosters healthier, more balanced relationships. Small, intentional changes in daily behavior can dramatically improve connection. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a hopeful, empowering insight. Love is not just a feeling to be hoped for. It is a set of actions, choices, and habits that can be learned, practiced, and perfected, turning ordinary relationships into deeply fulfilling partnerships. In How to Feel Loved by Chris Croft, the chapter, Making Love Last, reads like a heartfelt guidebook for keeping relationships vibrant, meaningful, and enduring. Croft begins with a playful but sobering observation. Love often starts with fireworks, excitement, and intense connection, but without conscious effort, that initial spark can fade into routine, misunderstandings, or complacency. He immediately engages a reader with relatable anecdotes of couples who still care deeply for each other, yet feel a subtle emotional distance after years together. The central message of the chapter is clear. Lasting love doesn't happen by chance. It is built intentionally, like tending a garden that needs consistent care, attention, and nurturing. Croft illustrates that making love last requires a combination of awareness, adaptability, and small, consistent actions. He revisits the concept of love languages, emphasizing that understanding and speaking your partner's emotional language over time is crucial. He brings humor and warmth to real-life examples. A partner leaving unexpected notes of appreciation, surprising the other with small gestures, or taking time for a shared activity even during a hectic week. These acts are simple, yet they signal attention, thoughtfulness, and care, building trust and emotional intimacy. Croft also emphasizes the importance of communication and emotional check-ins, noting that regular conversations about needs, feelings, and experiences prevent resentment from quietly building over time. The chapter also highlights a subtle but vital insight. Making love last is as much about giving as receiving. By taking responsibility for showing love rather than waiting to feel it from the other person, couples create a positive cycle of reinforcement. Croft stresses patience and resilience, pointing out that relationships naturally encounter challenges, stress, life changes, or disagreements, but love that is actively nurtured can grow stronger through these trials. He encourages readers to focus on progress over perfection, noticing small improvements and celebrating them rather than fixating on flaws. Key learning points from this chapter include: lasting love requires intentional, consistent effort, not just initial passion. Understanding and applying your partner's love language sustains emotional connection. Small, thoughtful gestures matter more than grand but rare actions. Open communication and regular emotional check-ins prevent misunderstandings. Focusing on giving love, noticing effort, and celebrating progress strengthens relationships over time. By the end of the chapter, Croft leaves readers with a deeply encouraging insight. Love that lasts is a living, breathing thing. It grows, evolves, and deepens when treated with awareness, care, and creativity. Relationships flourish not by chance, but by conscious choices to understand, nurture, and cherish each other every single day. Thank you for listening to How to Feel Loved. We've explored the ways love is expressed, the subtle signals that make us feel cherished, and the practical steps you can take to strengthen your connections. Remember, love isn't just a feeling. It's a skill, a language, and a choice. By understanding yourself, understanding your partner, and consciously nurturing the relationships that matter, you can create deeper bonds, more joy, and lasting fulfillment. Keep these insights close, practice them in your daily life, and watch as love grows in ways you never thought possible. If this audiobook helped you, share it with someone you care about, and continue your journey to feeling loved every single day.